Hello, good evening. I am the friend who keeps telling you stories, Mr. Dread. This story tonight, I hesitated for a long time before deciding to tell you, because it's not like an ordinary ghost story. The scary part is not what you can see, but you clearly reached out your hand, but still couldn't catch her. Some mothers only begin to truly become mothers after their child dies. So let's start now. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the late autumn night wind passed through the top floor of the hospital's inpatient department, bringing with it a cutting chill. The street lamps in the distance cast a dim light, barely illuminating this lonely place. On the rooftop, a woman in a thin hospital gown was kneeling on the edge of the roof, hugging a thin girl tightly in her arms. Her hair was disheveled by the wind, her face was pale and haggard, and her tears kept rolling down her face. The girl said softly, "Mom, don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. Please don't leave me. Okay? I don't want to go back to that house. Take me away. Okay?" The woman's body trembled slightly, and she responded with a trembling voice, "Okay. I'm sorry, Mira. I'm sorry. Mom will never leave you again. It's all my fault. Let's go. Leave there and never go back." The wind was getting louder. The girl looked up and smiled. Her originally pale face actually showed a faint blush. She said slowly, "Mom, you are so kind. Mira loves you." After saying this, her figure began to become more transparent, gradually dispersing into tiny starlight and quietly dissipating in the wind. "Mira, don't go. Don't leave your mother." The woman suddenly stretched out her hand, trying to grab the scattered spots of light, but she only hugged a piece of air. She knelt on the edge of the rooftop and cried, sobbing in the direction where her daughter disappeared, her voice hoarse and heart-wrenching. She cried for a long, long time until her voice was completely exhausted. Her tears dried up, and she collapsed to the ground, as if her soul had been sucked out of her. After a long time, she slowly stood up and staggered to the edge of the roof. She opened her arms, as if she was hugging the air, or as if she was trying to hug the child who had long disappeared again. "Wait for me, Mira. Mom is here." Without any hesitation, she jumped down. The night wind howled and the sky was silent. The girl's voice seemed to still echo in my ears. "Mom, come quickly." 6 hours before she jumped, nothing had happened. A man returned drunkenly to the place that once belonged to home. 6 hours ago, Marcus opened the door drunkenly, and a burning smell hit him in the face. This is a large 3-bedroom apartment of 150 square meters. It used to be bright and spacious, but now it is empty as if no one lives there. The living room is dim, with 2 white candles burning in the corner, and under the candles is a small black and white portrait of the deceased, and a few snacks that the children like to eat. The girl in the photo has a thin face and big eyes. She is smiling slightly and her eyes are clear. On the ground, a brazier was burning yellow paper. Lena knelt there, wiping her tears, throwing paper money into the brazier one by one, mumbling something. Marcus frowned as he entered the room, slammed the door, sat down on the sofa, kicked off his leather shoes and began to mutter, "Stop wailing there. What's the point of crying? Everyone's gone. It's been 7 or 8 days. You haven't cooked or swept the floor. All you do is cry." His voice became louder and louder, and his words were filled with alcohol and resentment. "If you really feel bad, then you can go with me." He cursed, but there was no sadness on his face, only irritation and impatience. Lena stopped crying and walked to the water dispenser. Her movements were slow, and every step was like a paper figure blown down by the wind. She held a cup of boiling water in her hand, but her fingers were shaking so much that she almost spilled the water. Marcus glanced at her, still with that contemptuous tone. "What can you do? You unlucky woman. What an eyesore." Lena suddenly stopped and took a deep breath. The trembling hands suddenly became surprisingly steady. The next second, she rushed to Marcus and poured the boiling water in her hand over him. "Ah!" Marcus screamed, jumped up from the sofa, covered his chest and took a few steps back. "You crazy woman! Are you crazy?" But Lena didn't listen to her at all. She suddenly exploded with anger that had been suppressed for 8 years. She cried and rushed towards Marcus, her hands like the claws of a wild beast, grabbing his face fiercely. "You're a beast. You're a murderer. You killed our daughter. You're a devil." Marcus was hit twice by the claws and felt a burning pain on his face. He immediately came to his senses, grabbed Lena's hair, and slapped her in the face. "You dare to touch me? I raised your daughter for 8 years for nothing, and you still dare to do that. You don't even know if the child is yours. That sickly little kid shouldn't have been born. Have you forgotten how I spent money on her medical treatment over the years? If you dare to fight me, I will beat you to death." He was like a madman, pulling Lena's hair and throwing her to the ground, punching and kicking her, cursing at her. He stopped panting only when Lena was completely unresponsive and collapsed on the ground like a puddle of mud. At this time, the doorbell rang. "Who is it?" Marcus yelled impatiently, kicked off his slippers on the ground and walked towards the door. The moment the door opened, a gust of cold wind rushed in. The voice-activated lights in the corridor were not on. Only the emergency light was flickering, as if it would go out at any time. "Shit!" Marcus cursed and slammed the door. But the strange thing was that as soon as he turned around, the lights in the room suddenly went out. The entire living room fell into darkness, with only 2 candles on the altar still crackling, and the flickering flames illuminating the smiling face of the girl in the black and white photo. "You don't even pay the electricity bill? You really don't plan to live like this, you loser woman." Marcus cursed as he walked over and picked up a candle from the altar. But just as he turned around, there was a soft pop sound. The black and white photo on the altar fell down. The front of the photo was placed on the altar, as if the artist didn't want anyone to see that smile anymore. Marcus froze for a moment, turned his head and looked, his mouth twitching, playing tricks. He ignored Lena, who had fallen to the ground, and went back to the bedroom holding the candle. He placed the candle on the bedside table and fell asleep. It was almost midnight. Due to the effect of alcohol and the venting of anger, he soon began to snore. But he didn't know that the nightmare had just begun. In the bedroom, Marcus fell asleep quickly. He turned over, his breathing became heavier and his snoring became louder. But suddenly, his brows furrowed, he groaned softly, and his body seemed to be struggling with something. A strange bang-bang sound, like the echo of a ball hitting the ground, rang in his ears. Boom, boom, boom. Marcus frowned, turned over and tried to pull the quilt tighter, but his hand touched the cold, smooth ground. Something was wrong, this wasn't a bed. He suddenly opened his eyes and was surprised to find himself sitting in a dark and empty place. It was pitch dark. There was no object around, no wind, and only the hard, cold ground beneath my feet. He stood up groggily and rubbed his temple, trying to determine where he was. Drunk? Dreaming? But the next second, that bang sound was closer. It's like a basketball falling not far away and then being picked up again. Marcus swallowed nervously, and his voice floated out into the dark space without an echo. He subconsciously called out, "Is anyone there?" Before he finished speaking, "Call out." A basketball flew straight out of the darkness and hit him in the face. "Ah!" he screamed, hugged his nose and squatted down, tears streaming down his face. "You are sick." Before he could finish his words, the second basketball hit him in the face with great accuracy. This time much harder, leaving a hot, fishy taste in his mouth, loosening several of his teeth, and causing a gushing nosebleed. He was stunned and dared not move. In the darkness, a small but piercing laugh slowly emerged. Hee hee. He knew it so well, it was Myra's laugh. A long-forgotten scene suddenly emerged in his mind. It was a few years ago, and he was playing the so-called shooting game with Mira at home. He stood at one end of the living room, and Mira stood at the other. The rules of the game were simple. Hit the other person with the basketball and then you could continue shooting. Mira was young and weak, and she could never beat him. But he could hit her head, shoulders, and cheeks with the ball accurately time and time again. Mira always ran away in panic, but he was laughing happily. "She needs some training. She's too delicate." He always said that. Once, Lena came home and saw them, and whispered, "Don't do this, okay? She's still young, if the neighbors see it." But he shook her hand off, closing the door and cursing, "You just spoil her." Lena could only wipe her tears secretly on the sofa, and Mira, the sensible little girl, would quietly come over, stretch out her little hand, and gently wipe away her tears. "Mom, it doesn't hurt. Dad is just playing games with me. Don't cry, Mira. It really doesn't hurt." Later, basketball was replaced by baseball, and the game became more and more brutal. Until one day, the bruises on Myra's face attracted the attention of the neighbors, and the neighborhood committee came to the door, and Marcus restrained himself. But even so, his temper never really stopped. Marcus hugged his head and huddled on the ground like a cowering animal. But the familiar bang-bang sound did not stop. 1, 2, 3 basketballs flew from all directions and hit him hard, each one bringing a burning pain. In the darkness, Myra's laughter became clearer and clearer, yet also more and more ethereal. The laughter seemed to come from the horizon, yet seemed to be right next to my ears. Marcus suddenly opened his eyes, looked around, and his lips trembled. "Mira, Dad was wrong. Don't smash it." At this moment, 2 balls of green flames slowly lit up in the depths of the darkness, like a pair of eyes hanging in the air. The laughter stopped. The figure of a little girl slowly walked out of the firelight. Her face was pale, her body was thin, her hair was messy. She lowered her head and said nothing. Marcus' blood ran cold, his legs went limp, and he slumped to the ground. He didn't dare blink or turn his head. That is, Mira. He couldn't be clearer. There was blood at the corner of her mouth, bruises on her cheeks, and a hollow look in her eyes. It was not a dream, nor was it an illusion. She was still smiling, but her smile had become stiff and cold. In the firelight, a small ball slowly rose up, with green flames, and rushed straight towards his face. Bang! Blood splattered, his teeth broke, and his screams echoed in the darkness. Then one ball after another kept flying at him, knocking him to the ground, unable to move. His legs felt like they were broken, and blood kept oozing out of his mouth and nose. Finally, a ball wrapped in green flames spun straight towards his chest. The flames ignited him instantly. In the bedroom, Marcus suddenly jumped up from the bed, whimpering and his limbs twitching wildly. He fell to the ground and rolled on the ground as if he was burned by fire, but the whole room was eerily silent, without any sound. He struggled to get up, his eyes bloodshot, and suddenly rushed to the bedside table, grabbed the candle and lit it. The flames rose instantly. He threw the candle onto the bed like a madman, and the flames spread wildly. At 1 o'clock in the morning on the 20th floor, a man with his whole body on fire rushed out of the balcony, climbed over the railing, and fell from a height. At 1:30 in the morning, the fire alarmed the entire building. Fire trucks, police cars, and ambulances arrived one after another. Rescuers broke into the bedroom, put out the fire, and carried out a bruised, unconscious woman from the living room floor. It's Lena. The man who was on fire and fell from the tall building had no signs of life. 3 o'clock in the morning, hospital. The emergency room was eerily quiet, with only the occasional flickering light and the quiet footsteps of the nurses in the corridor. Lena was lying on the hospital bed, her face pale and her eyes empty. She woke up, but the tears in her eyes seemed to have never stopped. She didn't ask anything, just looked at the ceiling, as if her soul was no longer in this body. She began to recall. 7 years ago, her name was Lena, and she was the top star working in a KTV. With outstanding looks, good figure, and gentle temper, she is always the most popular one in that circle. At that time, Marcus was just a middle-aged man with a little family background and a slightly slick look. He frequently gave her gifts, treated her to meals, and tried to please her in every way possible. And she, at first, just regarded him as a cash machine. Until that time she went abroad as a hostess and didn't come back for half a year. She found out that she was pregnant. She had originally planned to use the child as a bargaining chip to exchange for some money. But as her belly grew bigger and the fetus moved, she suddenly couldn't bear to give it up. This is my child. This was the first time she had this thought. She received some compensation and returned home with a pregnant belly and some meager savings. Before I could even warm up to the money, it was all swindled away by a so-called boyfriend. At that time, she had nowhere to go, so she rented a shabby and cheap little house, and the landlord was Marcus. Marcus said generously at the time, "It doesn't matter whether the child is mine or not. I will support you and your mother." She believed it. They lived together, Mira was born, and Lena really thought that life could start over. At the beginning, it was indeed okay. But a year later, Mira was diagnosed with congenital heart disease. Since then, there have been countless hospitalization orders, medication orders, and surgery orders. She seemed to have fallen into a bottomless pit. As money flowed out, Marcus's face became gloomier day by day. Lena tried to be patient. She felt that she owed it to Marcus, so she had to hold on as long as she could. But Marcus has changed. From a man who was willing to take care, He turned into a husband who looks for the wrong thing to vent his anger. 3 years ago, Marcus started beating people. At first they started throwing things and swearing, and later it turned into pushing, slapping, and even punching and kicking. Mira was not immune. He called it playing games, called her a sickly girl, and thought she was wasting money. Lena endured it. She didn't want Mira to lose her home, nor did she want to be left with nothing. But once, she really couldn't help asking him, "Marcus, can we go back to the way we were before and live a good life?" His answer was cold, "Sure, unless you're not Myra's mother." After saying that, he slammed the door and left home, and didn't return for 3 days. Lena sat at home, without eating or drinking, with a dead look in her eyes. But it happened that during those few days Mira fell ill. Her lips turned purple and she had difficulty breathing. She panicked and rushed to the hospital with her child in her arms. But when she stood at the door of the hospital, she hesitated. That sentence, "Unless you are not her mother," it echoed in her ears over and over again. She thought about her current situation. Old, without any skills, education, or money. She thought about the hospital bills, Myra's medicine, future treatments. She wavered. She really hesitated for a moment. But at that moment, Mira raised her head, opened her eyes, and smiled at her. "Mom, Mira is fine. Please don't abandon me. Okay? I don't want to go back to that house. Take me away. Okay?" Her vision went blurry. The doctor's shout brought her back to reality and took her to the hospital. But it's too late. Mira never woke up again. Lena lay on the hospital bed, tears streaming from the corners of her eyes, soaking the pillow. She kept wondering, if she hadn't hesitated that day, would Mira still be here? If she had left Marcus earlier, would things not have ended up like this? It's not that she didn't think about escaping, but she didn't have the ability or the confidence. She kept lying to herself, "Just bear with it a little longer. Maybe I can get through it." But it was not until Mira died that she realized, some mistakes can never be made up for in a lifetime. That night, the hospital corridor was as silent as a tomb. A familiar child's voice sounded in my ears. "Mom, come quickly." She opened her eyes. That was Myra's voice. Outside the ward, the corridor was dim, with only the green emergency lights flashing quietly. Lena, wearing a hospital gown and barefoot, walked out of the ward and headed towards the emergency passage step by step. In my ears, the familiar childish voice sounded again. "Mom, come quickly." She seemed to be being pulled up the stairs. Her steps were very slow and light, but with every step, her heart ached more. I don't know how many floors I climbed, but finally, an iron gate blocked the way forward. She reached out and pushed it away. Suddenly the view became clear. This is the rooftop of the hospital. The night wind at 4 o'clock is colder than a knife, and the wind in late autumn seems to blow people apart. The street lights in the distance were dimly lit and everything was so quiet. At the edge of the rooftop, a thin figure stood there. The little girl was wearing a familiar white dress. Her hair was blown by the wind, and there was a faint smile on the corner of her mouth. That face is so familiar that it almost breaks my heart. "Mira!" Lena's voice almost broke. She rushed over, hugged the child, and buried her head deep in her thin shoulders. "Mom, I'm sorry. Mom, I'm really sorry." Mira didn't cry. She just hugged her back gently, just as tenderly as she had always done when she coaxed her mother. "Don't be afraid, Mom. I won't hurt you. Don't leave me, okay? I don't want to go back to that house. Take me away, okay?" Lena's tears fell one by one and dripped on Myra's shoulder. She choked up and nodded. "Okay. Okay. Mom will never leave you again. Let's go and never go back." A blush appeared on the girl's face. "Mom is so nice. Myra loves you. I'm leaving now. Bye, Mom." After saying this, Myra's body began to become lighter and brighter. Her figure gradually faded and turned into starlight, flying up with the wind and slowly disappearing into the night. "Don't go. Don't leave, Mom." Lena fell to the ground and stretched out her hands frantically towards the starlight, as if she wanted to hug it again, to keep it one more time. She cried for a long time until her voice became hoarse and her tears dried up. Finally, she slowly stood up, her eyes empty, as if she had finally accepted her fate and was finally free. She walked to the edge of the roof and opened her arms, as if she was still hugging the child tightly. She whispered softly, "Myra, wait for Mommy, Mommy is here." Then take a leap. The wind is still blowing. It's night, and it's not yet light. The figures of mother and daughter reunited briefly on the rooftop, and eventually disappeared into the deepest darkness with the wind. No one knows where they ended up. All we know is that since then, no one has ever seen the light in that ward turned on again. The wind never stopped that night. The crowd downstairs in the hospital saw a figure falling from the roof, but no one knew who she was following. Some people said that it was very dark that night, but there was a small light on the roof, flashing in the wind like stars. She finally held her daughter, but it was too late. I am Mr. Dread, a friend who will accompany you into the night with stories. If you have ever experienced something similar, or you have also missed that person, feel free to leave your story in the comments section. We see you in the next story. I hope that voice will never appear in your dreams again.